Let's bring in the GOP Governor, Pete Ricketts of the great state of Nebraska. Good morning, Governor.
Good morning. Thanks very much for having me on.
Well, thanks for coming on. We're listening to all of this news. Our hearts are broken for the people of Ukraine. How does it affect us here? In many ways, but first and foremost, gasoline. Gas prices are through the roof. And yesterday, the president made the announcement, no longer will we buy oil from Russia. You can see the numbers there. A year ago, $2.80. Today, the folks of Nebraska will pay around $4.25, if not more, for gasoline. But the president cut off the supply, the imports from Russia. However, we're not going to be drilling here. Now he's looking at Venezuela. He's looking at Iran and other countries and trying to get oil from them. But isn't this his policy, his green policy, costing all of us, the folks of Nebraska, people around America, more money because he won't drill here?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, it was his policy that I think encouraged Putin to invade in the first place by making us dependent upon foreign oil again. If we were energy independent, that would give Putin more thought about invading. What the president needs to do is reverse his green policies that have made us dependent on foreign oil, places like you mentioned, Venezuela, Iran. And what he needs to do now is reestablish the Keystone pipeline. Right. Premier Alberto said that he can get that up and running by first quarter of next year. We can rely more heavily on things we produce here in the United States, like ethanol as well, to help stretch our fuel supply. We should be selling oil to our friends and allies and not buying them from our enemies.
Absolutely. And what you just said right there, is sobering, because you said that we've heard that, they could have the Keystone up by the end of the first quarter of next year. That means, Governor, had Joe Biden not pulled the plug on the first day, the Keystone would be flowing all that oil that we currently need all over America. The reason we're talking to you about today's developments is because the Keystone would have gone across Nebraska. And right now, the #1 story on FoxNews.com is a former Keystone pipeline worker says U.S. energy crisis is a result of Biden's policies. We tried to warn you. And everybody tried to warn him, Governor, but he wasn't going to listen.
Yeah, that's exactly right. One of the things we talked about when we were talking about why we should have the Keystone pipeline was energy security. I mean, Canada is one of our closest allies, and to have oil relationship with them is way better than doing with Venezuela or Iran.
What could go wrong?
Just goes to show that the president is living in some sort of, disconnected world if he thinks we can not be energy independent and have security.
Right. So, Governor, this is what I find so insidious. In America, we're a profit-driven company, a free market company, but not when it comes to oil and gas. Part of the green technology movement is to destroy fossil fuels. Phil Flynn, Fox News contributor, business expert, knows all about commodities, oil and gas, said this is what's been going on below the radar. Watch.
Follow the money or the lack of money, right? This is an administration that's own Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, went to the banks after the G7 energy deal and said, listen, we want to make sure that no banks lend money to fossil fuel companies unless absolutely necessary. They've weaponized the Federal Reserve to go after banks to look at their carbon footprint and say, hey, if you're lending money to U.S. oil and gas, you could be it could be a crime against climate. We're going to go after you. They're going after pension funds, investors. I have customers, Sean, whose banks have closed their accounts. Why? Because they're oil producers. That's un-American in my view, and I think that kind of pressure on pension funds and investors is what's really killing the U.S. energy industry right now.
We have $244 billion in U.S. liquefied gas projects stalled because they can't get financing. Do you believe, did you know this was happening? And how can we let this stand?
Yeah, in fact, some of my colleagues in other states like North Dakota, Wyoming, Oklahoma, Texas have been also on the administration about this war on fossil fuels by using the banking system. And again, it gets back to that the Biden administration is pushing this radical green agenda, is ignoring the realities that we are still relying on fossil fuel and could be energy independent if it weren't for their policies.
And makes us more vulnerable. It gets us into wars. And now you have places like Europe who said we had no choice but to go to the Russians because you guys aren't supplying it like you could. We haven't developed the technology to transport liquid gas like we should. Why wouldn't we want to be the #1 supplier to our allies? That's anti-American behavior.
Yep, and this is something that, again, the president is living in some different world when he keeps pushing his electric vehicles and thinking that's going to be a solution to, a short-term problem here. As you said earlier, there are children dying in Ukraine right now. We need a solution near term, and the near-term solution is ramp up our oil production, get the Keystone pipeline going again, and become energy independent, supply energy to Europe so they don't have to deal with Putin.
And it would provide high-paying jobs in the energy sector as well for Americans. There's some iconic brands that we all enjoy here in America that I'm sure Russians enjoy too, but no longer. Heineken, KFC, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Starbucks, McDonald's, just to name some of the companies that have suspended sales in Russia. Many of them are donating money, like Pizza Hut and KFC donating $1 million to Red Cross. And some of them are closing, and they're still going to pay their employees. How powerful of a statement is this? And will it affect Putin's moves in Ukraine?
Well, I think what it demonstrates is that American companies are understanding the seriousness of this. And frankly, we need something like a new Cold War here. We need to isolate Russia. We can't allow them to be able to invade their neighbors and not have consequences. And frankly, given who Putin is, it seems to me that this is going to be something where they've got to be completely isolated, which means no business with them whatsoever. So I think these companies are wise. This is where this is all going to go.
Yeah, and there's a graphic that shows the logos of the various companies that have cut ties with Russia. The big question is, after the war with Ukraine, how quickly do those companies go back? Governor, I know that I've been to Lincoln, Nebraska a number of times. I know that that's where the legislature, the unicameral, is based, and your office is as well. When you walk around town, what do people ask you about this? Because people ask us on the streets or our friends, they go, what do you think is going to happen with Putin and Ukraine? What is the major concern of the people of Nebraska?
Well, I think the thing that people in Nebraska are most concerned about is just the people of Ukraine. We have a Ukrainian population here, and people are concerned about the children that are being impacted, the country, and they want to see action. They want to see that Putin is being held accountable so that this comes to an end. And frankly, the administration is not moving fast enough to be able to isolate Russia, to take the steps to be able to make sure that they pay for this, this transgression. And frankly, we got to cut off the funding to the Russian war machine, which is its oil.
Sure, but at the same time, yesterday the president said, there's going to be pain at the pump. I was listening to some interviews with people who were actually at gas stations yesterday, and they said, if this is what I have to do to pay more for gas to help the people of Ukraine, I'm all in for now.
Yeah, I got to tell you, first of all, we got to remember the pain at the pump was happening long before this crisis.
Absolutely.
The Biden administration's policy starting last year started driving up the price of oil, and his reckless policies with regard to the stimulus package of March of last year launched inflation. So this was happening beforehand. And I think what you saw, if you may recall, when China was trying to punish our American farmers with their policies during the Trump administration, the American farmers said, hey, fine, we'll step up and we'll do the pain because we know that's what the right thing to do. I think Americans are willing to do the same thing with regard to Ukraine, but let's not try and blame gas prices on just the Ukraine. This was happening by the Biden administration's policies long before the Ukraine became a crisis.
And if we actually armed them in November and December, we wouldn't be scrambling to get them old jets here in March. So it's an embarrassment. Governor, thanks so much.
Thanks, Governor.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.